Hi, I'm Dr. Susie, and welcome to the second step. In this step, we're going to learn how to relax the pelvic floor and perform the reverse Kegel. In the first step, you learned how to contract the pelvic floor, which is very important. But I actually think that this is the most important step, and that is relaxing the pelvic floor. The question is your pelvic floor quite stiff? The reason I think many men should do this particular step, or the reason I find this step most important, is that many men don't necessarily recognize that they might in fact have a tight or non-relaxing pelvic floor. If you've got acquired ED, if you've got, which is a psychogenic erectile dysfunction, if you've got acquired premature ejaculation or even delayed ejaculation, there's a very good chance that you in fact have a non-relaxing pelvic floor, one that's never been picked up before. So that's why this session is particularly important. For many of you, the idea of this having a tight pelvic floor or holding stress in your pelvic floor might seem like a very new concept. So in this particular session, we're going to deep dive into some of the science of stress in the pelvis and why holding stress in the pelvis causes sexual dysfunction. I'll cover some practical tools that you can use straight away to relax your pelvic floor. I'll give you the instructions on how to perform the reverse Kegel exercise, which is the best way to relax your pelvic floor. And then we'll close with some meditations. Ready to get started? Let's do it. Okay, so you learned how to contract the pelvic floor, and that was the Kegel. But the question is, can you relax? The biggest mistake men make is not understanding how to relax the pelvic floor. In fact, most men often think that the relaxation is just the absence of the contraction. That's not quite right. In fact, relaxation and release is an active process in itself. So learning the importance of the relaxation phase is super, super important. What you should remember is the pelvic floor is not concrete, okay? Most of us are aware that we've got a thoracic diaphragm. We also have the urogenital or the pelvic floor. That's a diaphragm too. And in fact, they both move together with your breath. We call that piston breathing. So your pelvic floor actually moves. And what you want is to be able to engage with that pelvic floor, because the opposite of a stiff pelvic floor is one that's flexible and that moves. And so in today's session, we're really going to be focusing on learning to connect with the pelvic floor through breath. And this is called proprioception, connecting with a muscle, knowing what a muscle is doing in time and space. When you perform a reverse Kegel, it helps you understand what that true length of that muscle is when it's stretched. So this will allow you to connect with it when you want to relax it more easily. The problem is that many men aren't aware that they could have a stiff pelvis. And many people who've got stiff pelvises will often have, complain of having tight hips, or perhaps they've had injuries to their lower back or have had chronic back pain. That will cause you to have a very tight pelvis potentially. Sometimes holding on to your urine or holding on to your bowels can contribute to a hypertonic or tense pelvis. And when you have a tense pelvis, what many people don't realize is that it can affect sexual function. So that this slide about the pandemic of stress in the pelvis, well, I can't say that I came up with that term completely. I kind of stole it from Dr. Breanne Grogel, who who was a pelvic health specialist in her March 2020 pelvic floor event, had a line of that there's a pandemic of stress in the pelvis. And the idea here is that we can actually hold stress, anxiety, and fear, and that can actually lead to us tightening our pelvic floor muscles. Often we don't even know we're doing it. And so people have termed this phenomena the pandemic pelvis, because there is a lot of stress being held in the pelvis. Just like how you can hold stress potentially in lots of other muscles, just like how you can hold stress in your jaw. You know, you might have temporomandibular jaw dysfunction. You're clenching your jaw and holding your masseters really, really tight. It can cause bruxism and teeth grinding at night. You can have pelvic stress as well. And if you have a chronically tight or a chronically contracted pelvis, it just simply tells your nervous system, it upregulates the sympathetic nervous system. It tells your nervous system, I'm tense. And when it regulates or upregulates your nervous system, telling your nervous system that you're more tense, the sympathetic nervous system is a little bit more dialed up. And what people may not necessarily realize is that sex is under control of this autonomic nervous system. Yeah, the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system. It's a delicate balance. You need the parasympathetic nervous system to be strong to get the erection, and the sympathetic nervous system is there for ejaculation. But if your sympathetic nervous system is dialed up, it's upregulated, you've got too much tension there and it's telling your nervous system, sympathetic nervous system, be active, it's going to cause you to lose your erection and it's going to cause you to get premature ejaculation. Unfortunately, the more dysfunction you have, the more stress and fear, and you feed this cycle, and it's an endless feeding loop. If we look at some of the evidence or some of the theory behind it, and we'll briefly sidestep onto this slide, I think it's useful to just quickly understand some of this. That our sexual function, pelvic pain, as well as pelvic floor dysfunction, that is a tight pelvic floor, these concepts are actually much more interrelated than we ever thought. There's a lot of overlap. We also know that the pelvic floor dysfunction is what we call psychophysical. That means that when there is this physical tension or this tightness in the pelvic floor can actually be triggered by psychological anxieties. We also know that in sexual dysfunction, you have this upregulated nervous system. That is, your sympathetic nervous system is a little bit dialed up. And using the correlation of some of the work that Professor Wise and Professor Anderson in the Wise-Anderson protocol, previously known as the Stanford protocol, using some of their work and in chronic pelvic pain, they've worked out that there is a lot of effect of emotions on chronic pelvic pain. So if we appreciate that chronic pelvic pain, sexual dysfunction, and pelvic floor tightness are all interrelated, then I think that you can adapt that idea to understand that strong emotions can cause pelvic muscles to tighten in response to the level of intensity of those emotions. And often this is done without the person's awareness. This could mean that emotions towards sex or emotions towards your sexual partner could in fact be causing a lot of your pelvic muscles to tighten without you even realizing it. The pelvic floor is like an emotional organ. It does hold our stress and in particular some of our feelings. But what do we do about this? Okay, so perhaps you've got this chronically contracted or really, really tense pelvis and this sympathetic nervous system that's upregulated, which is contributing to erectile dysfunction and premature ejaculation or DE. How do I break the cycle? Well, one of the analogies that is used by Professor Anderson and Dr. Wise, who are the originators of the paradoxical relaxation approach for the pelvic floor, one of the analogies they use is that the first thing you really need to do is reduce the nervous system arousal. And this is a little bit likened to a cat in a tree, a frightened cat in a tree. So when you have this frightened cat in a tree, you will notice that, you know, the tail's down and the claws are out and the muscles are really tense. And if you want to get the cat out of the tree, it's not really that easy. You can't just grab the cat. Its claws are like this in the tree. So rather than trying to get the cat out, you're better off actually reducing the cat's muscular tension, okay? Because it's got an overactive sympathetic nervous system. You're better off calming the cat down, reducing the muscular tension, and then coaxing the cat out of the tree. So How does that relate to sexual function? Well, what we want to do is intentionally relax the muscle. If we can intentionally just relax your pelvic floor, then we can override this reflex of ejaculation. And that's certainly what has been reinforced by the androurologists. There was a paper, a review paper, the pelvic floor, called Pelvic Floor and Sexual Male Dysfunction. And this paper was a review paper with the androurologists, Italian androurologists, and they basically reiterated this idea that if you relax your pelvic floor intentionally, that you can actually overcome premature ejaculation. Similarly, the Stafford protocol, otherwise known now as the Wise-Anderson protocol for chronic pelvic pain for men, also takes a similar approach. It uses something called the paradoxical relaxation approach. That is that you need to accept that there's some tension to reduce the muscle-related tension first. And this is all going to fit in soon with the protocol when I ask you to flex the penis in order to relax the pelvic floor. We'll get to that soon. But I know it's really difficult. If I just said to you now, okay, relax, just relax your pelvic floor. Go on, just relax it. You're going to look at me like, relax what? What do you want me to, what exactly do you want me to do? You've got no sense of what exactly you're relaxing. So I know how tricky it can be, but we will get there. What I do want you to know is that the secret to all of this, the secret to a healthy nervous system, is being able to switch gears between the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system state. A healthy nervous system is one that is, yes, you can arouse, but you've got to be able to deactivate, and you've got to be able to do this smoothly, okay? You need to be able to switch gears effortlessly, and we're going to really teach you how to do this, particularly with pelvic RMBT, how to keep calm, how to relax your pelvic floor. I always like to explain to people that the autonomic nervous system is like yin yang. You've got the parasympathetic nervous system and you've got the sympathetic nervous system, and they need to be fluid. You need to be able to move between both of them fluidly. I like to explain to people that when it comes to sexual function, think of it as, there's two dials. You've got these two dials. You've got the parasympathetic dial and you've got the sympathetic nervous system dial. We know that for an erection, you need the parasympathetic nervous system to be turned up. And we know for ejaculation, we know that you need to have the sympathetic nervous system, but you need to be able to switch between those easily. If you've got an over dialed up sympathetic nervous system, one that's too upregulated, what's that going to do? Well, it's going to mean that you're not going to get an erection easily, or you're going to lose your erection. And it's going to mean that you're more likely to have premature ejaculation. So we need to dial down the sympathetic nervous system. That's the fight-flight state. And we need to make sure that we've got a dialed up parasympathetic nervous system. All right, let's get started with some tapping. So what we're going to do to get straight into this first, this idea of being able to relax, being able to intentionally relax, we're going to take on something called the paradoxical relaxation approach. That is accepting that we've got tension in order to reduce the muscular tension. And we're going to get started with a technique called emotional freedom technique. We're going to borrow this tool. We know that Prince Harry and Meghan Markle talk a lot about it. They talk about this tool and EMDR. And I suppose given that they've got the best access to therapists, they swear by it. So you should possibly have a little go at it as well. Not to say that there isn't any evidence. There's emerging evidence that EFT as a self-help tool is certainly very, very useful in improving a number of physiological markers. How it works on the central nervous system is a little bit trickier, how exactly it works, but they do think that by opening up these meridians or energy lines, it enables you to pair this idea of having stress and tension with unconditional love in the limbic system of the back of the brain. It helps reduce some of that fears. Let's just get started and see how we go. So what I want you to do is I want you to tap with me on these particular tapping points. And as you're doing the tapping, I just want you to say to yourself in your mind, even though I have this tension or pelvic tension or stress in my body, I unconditionally love myself. Try it now. So we'll start with the top of the head. So tapping here. Even though I have this stress or tension in my body, I unconditionally love myself. Now I want you to tap on the eyebrows here. Even though I have this tension in my body, I unconditionally love myself. The side of the eyes. Even though I have this tension in my body, I unconditionally love myself. Under the eyes. Even though I have this stress or tension in my body, I unconditionally love myself. Under the nose. Even though I have this stress and tension in my body, I unconditionally love myself. Under the chin. Even though I have this stress or tension in my body, I unconditionally love myself. Under the collarbones. Even though I have this stress or tension in my body, I unconditionally love myself. And we're going to go under the armpits. Even though the axilla, even though I have this stress or tension in my body on the other side, I unconditionally love myself. And then the karate chop point. Even though I have this stress or tension in my body, I unconditionally love myself. All right. So now that we're feeling a little bit more engaged and relaxed, let's get started with some physical tools. Now, the best physical tool that I could recommend to anybody if they want to relax their pelvic floor, okay, is the Asian squat. That's right, the Asian squat. If you don't get down in an Asian squat every day, you should try. Do it for me right now. Let's check in if you can do it. I'd like to check if you can because it tells me a lot about your hip tightness. It tells me if you're got a lot of tension in your hips. It tells me a lot about your knees. It tells me a lot about your ankles if you can or can't do it. So if you can get into an Asian squat right now, I want you to do so. This is a position that enables your pelvic floor to really naturally open up. So you'll get a nice natural stretch. When you stretch your pelvic floor, it boosts relaxation. You've got stretch receptors that boost the relaxation response. So not only is it relaxing for the pelvic floor, it also enables it to stretch out as well. A number of the exercises that we're going to do later on, particularly the reverse Kegel, could be trialed in the Asian squat. I do find that when people go into the Asian squat, they can really feel with gravity their pelvic floor opening up. So doing the reverse Kegel in this particular position is not a bad idea, but just getting down in there, just making sure that your joints go into full flexion is really healthy for it. It enables the synovial fluid to move around and a lot of your muscles to stretch. But it's also really good for your lymphatics. I call it like the natural hose that sort of, your lymphatics are obviously transporting a lot of the toxins in your fluid. And when you kink, it's like when you kink a hose. You kink a hose and then you let the hose unkink and there's a big flush. So you can flush a lot of your system simply by going down into an Asian squat and then standing up. It's a really healthy position. The other thing that I encourage men to try is daily stretches. And let me ask you this. I mean, how often would you do these stretches in the last 2 weeks? If you say to me, no, I don't think I do any of these stretches, then how about trying to integrate some stretches on a daily basis? There's a good chance it'll help you relax your pelvis. There's a good chance if you're not doing these stretches, you probably tighten your pelvic floor as well. A hypertonic pelvic floor is very often accompanied by tension in the hip muscles, as well as muscles like the piriformis, the obturator internus, the coccygeus, your hamstrings. So doing these exercises are good ways to kind of stretch those associated muscles too. You can see here in the first one that the gent's down in what I would call a splayed leg child's pose. Okay, so the legs are splayed, he's down in a child's pose, giving a nice stretch to the back, particularly your lumbar spine, as well as your hips. In B here, you can see he's in the butterfly position, giving a really good stretch to those adductors. In C here, we're stretching the hip flexors on each side. So you give a good stretch to the psoas muscle, which is very important, connecting the lumbar spine to the hips. And here in the final photo with the legs up against the wall, you can see a really great stretch to the adductors. Men are very tight there quite often. Just have a think about what you could do every day, a daily stretch. whether or not you might be watching TV, just get on the floor and perhaps stretch out your pelvis. I'm sure it'll thank you for it. Another thing you can do straight away to try and release some tension in the pelvic floor, or even assess if your pelvic floor is feeling a bit tight, is what I call the tennis ball massage. Now, this is a really good one. It's an easy one. All you need to do is grab a tennis ball and simply place the tennis ball underneath your perineum. Find that soft spot between your genitals and your anus where it presses up inside your body, and just sort of do a bit of acupressure. Just move around it. Give it a bit of a gentle release of that muscle and the fascial tissue. Just breathe and rock around a little bit. Just open up the perineal floor of any tension. If that doesn't suit you, then why not try hot baths? We know that there is great science in heat. In particular, we know that thermostimulation seems to activate and release a lot of the internal anal sphincter. It helps relax the pelvis. So hot baths are very good. We know that we use hot baths a lot to help with pelvic pain, but it also can help with pelvic tightness as well. If hot baths aren't your thing, then you should really check out the science of infrared saunas, or even saunas in general. I'm really fond of them. We can talk a lot more about them later, but you can certainly hear a lot from Professor Andrew Huberman at the Huberman's Lab if you want to find out more about the benefits of heat and saunas in your health. All right, so we've covered some of those physical tools. Let's get into the tool that I think works the best at stretching your pelvic floor and relaxing it, and that's called the reverse Kegel. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to explain how to do the reverse Kegel, and we'll have an opportunity to do it together. So the reverse Kegel is essentially the opposite of a Kegels. All right, in a Kegels, you are contracting the pelvic floor. And now what we're going to do is relax, release, let go of that pelvic floor and stretch it and balloon it open. And the way that we do this is first we'll get you to inhale. And when you inhale, you can see from this first picture here, when you're inhaling, you're expanding your belly and your pelvic floor will descend. So you're drawing a deep breath in. Allow that belly to expand, keep it nice and soft. And what I want you to do is then hold your breath and apply the reverse Kegel. And the reverse Kegel is essentially about building a little bit of internal pressure. It's like there is a pressure or a balloon inside your pelvis and it's blowing up, okay? And as it blows up, you'll feel the pelvic floor ballooning open. And as it's doing so, you can apply a little bit of pressure at the front where the urethra is and a little bit of pressure around the anus. And when I say a little bit of pressure, it almost feels like you're pushing a wee. It's like you're going to the toilet and you want to push a wee out just a little faster. You're like, oh, I've got to quickly get it out. Just that internal push. Don't use your abdominal muscles. Keep those nice and relaxed. It's an internal pressure. And with the back passage, if you want to balloon it a little bit open, it's like you're kind of doing a bit of a fart, just, sneaking some air out, applying a little bit of pressure there, and you can feel the floor stretch. And then I want you to let it go with an exhale, and you'll feel the pelvic floor ascend and rise back up. So doing it again, when you inhale, I want you to draw that air down into the belly, holding it there nice and soft. Hold your breath. And then apply the reverse Kegel, build the pelvic pressure up, ballooning it open. Feel the ballooning open of the pelvic floor, applying pressure at the front, apply pressure at the back, and then exhale, allowing the pelvic floor to ascend back inwards to the pelvis. This is just another diagram. It's my drawing, just trying to explain it a little bit better, but let's try it again. So here you can see you're breathing in, you're allowing the diaphragm to descend, and your pelvic floor will descend too. You can see your belly goes out nice and soft. Then in the second photo, I want you to hold the breath and build that pressure. Feel it building inside. It's a subtle inside building of a pressure. You'll feel the ballooning open of the floor, or that stretch in the pelvic floor, and then you can apply a little bit of pressure at the front, like you're doing a wee, pushing it a bit, and at the back, like you're sneaking some wind out, and then letting it go. Exhale, allow that pelvic floor to ascend back up again. Okay, you might hear me refer to these as the levels of when we balloon the floor going down to the basement. and then back up to the lobby is resting. We'll talk more about that later. But to kind of put this all together, why don't we practice now the reverse Kegel meditation? This is a 6-minute meditation now. Like I said, you might want to try this in an Asian squat. And if you tire, obviously go into a lying down position with your knees up, or you can be in a seated position. It's up to you. I'm going to press play. You'll hear some bells chiming initially. And at the end of the meditation, I'll ask you a couple of questions. Let's practice a reverse Kegels exercise. You can do this exercise seated, or you could practice it in an Asian squat. Slow down your breathing, breathing slowly through your nose, and visualize drawing the air down deep into your lower belly, down into your pelvis. Go beyond your navel. And as you inhale, I want you to feel your belly softly expanding. And as you exhale slowly through the nose, allow the belly to recoil back into its resting position. On inhale, I want you to fill your pelvis up, like you have air in a balloon. Now I want you to hold your breath, and in this position apply the reverse Kegel, a gentle stretch to the pelvic floor that allows it to expand like a balloon. Feel your pelvic floor balloon open, broaden, soften and lengthen. When you do this, you feel the pelvic floor drop lower to the basement, and when you let go of it, connect with the pelvic floor muscle as it naturally recoils back up into position, rising back up to the lobby level with your expiration. Okay, let's do that again. On inhalation, I want you to fill your pelvis up, like as though you have air in a balloon. Then hold that breath. Build this pressure in the balloon, like pressure in your pelvis. Apply that pressure from inside, at the penis, as though you're pushing a wee a little faster, and around the anus, like as though you're doing a sneaky fart. Don't give yourself a hernia. If you're activating your transverse abdominal muscles, you are pushing too hard. Go super gentle. It's an internal pressure. Think of it like you're blowing up a balloon on the inside. Let's try the reverse Kegel again now. On inhalation, I want you to fill your pelvis up like you've got air in a balloon filled in your pelvis. Now hold your breath and build in your mind this pressure in your pelvis, as though you're blowing a balloon up in your pelvis, applying pressure from the inside at the penis as though you're pushing a wee, around the anus like you're doing a fart, and then relax, let it go. In a reverse Kegel, you should feel a gentle stretch at the pelvic floor, allowing it to balloon open, broaden, soften, lengthen as it lowers to the basement, and then let go. Allow that muscle to naturally spring back up into the lobby position. Let's try the reverse Kegel one more time. On inhalation, fill your pelvis up like you're blowing air in a balloon, then hold your breath, build up this pressure of a balloon, applying the pressure from the inside, and then relax, let it go, feeling that pelvic floor rise back from the basement to the lobby. Now what I want to do is try a little exercise that helps us sync those pelvic floor muscles. This time I want to try and help you isolate around the penis, around the anus as separate components of the stretch, and then we'll coordinate and sync those components together. First, let's just focus on the area around the penis, applying a stretch there. Taking a deep breath in now, I want you to draw down deep into the pelvis and then hold your breath, applying a little pressure at the front of the pelvic floor as though you want to hurry a wee out. And then relax, release, exhale, allow the pelvic floor to rise back to the lobby from being at the basement. All right, this time we're going to focus around the levator ani and around the anus. So taking a deep breath in, draw deep into the pelvis, and then hold your breath, applying pressure in the pelvic floor as though there's a balloon that's blowing up. But this time around the anus, I want you to push your balloon out. That's it. And then allow a release,
allowing those muscles around the anus to recoil back, rise back up to the lobby from being in the basement. The idea is that you feel the muscle lengthen its entirety. This is about your proprioception, your ability to detect what a muscle is doing in time and space. That's the key to intentional relaxation. Better proprioception builds better intentional control. All right, this time let's do it again, but apply both pressure around the penis and the anus together. See if you can sync it more mindfully now. Taking a breath in, I want you to draw down deep into the pelvis. Fill up like a balloon. Then hold your breath and apply a little pressure around the front of the pelvic floor like you're hurrying a wee, and now to the back of the pelvic floor as though you're sneaking out some wind. And then relax. Exhale, allow the pelvic floor to rise back to the lobby. How did you go with this? How did you find the reverse Kegel? Was it easy, or do you think you need some more help? Did you find it easy to isolate the muscles at the front around the penis, or the back around the anus, or to synchronize those components? Did you get any pain? Let me know when you feel your form in. Just click to complete your form. Practicing this technique of the reverse Kegel exercise again.
Okay, so how did you go? Some people do find reverse Kegel a very, very new idea, and it's not uncommon for you to have some difficulties. It's not uncommon for people to find it difficult to stretch certain areas out, whether it be the front or the back end, or even experience some discomfort. In your online form, please let me know how you went with the reverse Kegel. To reinforce the reverse Kegel and to also integrate the idea of the Kegel with the reverse Kegel, I want you to try and use a concept of levels, okay? And what I mean by that is I would like you to start thinking about the pelvic floor and its movement, because remember, the idea here is we want our pelvic floor to be flexible and not stiff. It's not concrete, it's moving. But you might not feel it necessarily moving initially. What you need to do is visualize its movement, detect it first. So to do that, it's really useful to think about the pelvic floor's movement in terms of it moving through levels. And so start to visualize perhaps the urogenital or the pelvic floor diaphragm moving when you contract it up. It's moving upwards to the first level. We'll call it the first floor. And then when you relax it again, it hits the lobby. And when you apply the reverse Kegel, it's dropping down to the basement, ballooning open. And then when you relax, it comes back to the lobby. I think this is a really useful visualization tool to start considering the movement of the pelvic floor as moving through levels. So to reinforce this, let's practice another meditation which integrates the contraction as well as the breath, as well as the reverse Kegels.
Let's practice pelvic breathing with your diaphragm as though you're imagining you're looking up at the pelvis from below and your pelvic floor is moving through 3 levels of a building: a first floor, a lobby, and a basement. So get into a comfortable position, either lying down on your back or sitting in a chair, and slow down your breathing. Breathe slowly through your nose and visualize drawing the air down deep into your lower belly, down into your pelvis. Go beyond your navel. You may like to place your hands below your navel, and when you breathe into your pelvis, I want you to visualize you're looking up from below, up into the pelvic floor and imagine the pelvic floor moving with your breath. Imagine your pelvic floor moving through 3 levels of a building, where there's a lobby on ground level, a first floor above, and a basement below. During this exercise, we're going to relate the Kegels and the reverse Kegels to these levels with your breath. To start, let's perform a Kegels exercise now. Contract your pelvic floor. When you perform a Kegels, I want you to perceive the pelvic floor rising as though it's taking a lift to the first level. And then release, and on exhalation, let the pelvic floor relax, drop back and lower to lobby. Now I want you to apply a reverse Kegel and lower your pelvic floor into the basement by applying a little pressure on the pelvic floor now. Allow it to balloon open, soften and lengthen. And then relax. And as you relax, allow that pelvic floor to come back up to resting at the lobby. Let's try that again. Now I want you to perform a Kegel, contract, draw the pelvic floor up from the lobby, up to the first floor. Now relax and drop it back to the lobby. Hold your breath and now apply the reverse Kegel and feel the pelvis drop to the basement, allowing it to balloon open, soften and relax. And then let go, breathe and bring it back to the lobby. Let's do that again. I want you to perform the Kegel by contracting, holding it up there now for 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then allow it to come down from the first floor. Drop down to the lobby. And now I want you to hold your breath and apply the reverse Kegel and feel as though the pelvis is dropping down to the basement. Allow it to balloon open, softening, relaxing, broadening, lengthening. Now relax and allow it to come back up to the lobby. When you perform this exercise, you might start feeling the motion of this ascent and descent of your pelvic floor more easily. And I want you to perceive pelvic breathing as the pelvic floor is moving through these levels. You should practice this until you can tune into pelvic breathing through the different levels more automatically.
Okay, I hope that was useful for you. It can be a little bit tricky, but it is very useful to start using this as a visualization tool. Okay, so in summary, in today's session, we've focused on always breathing from the belly, but this time we've really concentrated on learning about relaxation of the pelvic floor. In particular, we've covered some physical tools such as the Asian squat, stretches, the use of a tennis ball, heat and hot water, and we've shown you how to do the reverse Kegel and how that can be used for you to understand how to fully stretch your pelvic floor and induce the relaxation response. Over the next coming weeks, I hope that you can integrate the reverse Kegel with your Kegels, and hopefully you'll be seeing soon some results. In the next session, we'll be exploring pelvic breathing. That is, we'll be learning how to use visualization tools so that you can engage more with the pelvic floor. I hope you can join me.